In the summer of 1940, Europe was in utter chaos. France had surrendered to the Germans, leaving Britain as the last significant force to oppose Hitler's objectives, his ultimate move in the game. The stage was prepared for what would become one of World War II's most iconic chapters, Hitler's invasion of Britain under Operation-Sealion. The goal was clear: defeat Britain, gain control of Europe, and be the dominant power of the world. However, before Hitler prepared for this aggressive plan, he understood this was a critical challenge. Despite his extraordinary military exploits, the British Isles remained a powerful power for centuries, with a robust fleet and a resilient air force. Their history of endurance and global significance made attacking them seem intimidating. Thus, Nazi Germany's planned invasion of Britain had to be something extraordinary. Codenamed as Operation-Sealion, Hitler planned to topple Britain from its throne of megapower. It was set to take place in September 1940, and if it was successful, Adolf Hitler would have completed his dominance over Western Europe. Before the storm of World War II hit Europe, Britain was one of the world's most powerful nations, with an empire that stretched across the world, from massive territories in Africa and Asia to Caribbean islands. Britain was a true megapower. Its power extended beyond land and resources to include unrivaled naval strength and industrial force. The Royal Navy, sometimes known as the Senior Service, had commanded the seas for generations, guaranteeing that Britain could safeguard her trade routes and colonies while protecting influence anywhere in the world. In Europe, Britain was seen as a symbol of solidity and power. Its democracy, rich history, and worldwide reach powered it to the forefront of international politics. France, its closest ally, had the same standing as a European power, but they were viewed as the protectors of Western democracy against the increasing tide of fascism. But the world was shifting. Across the Channel, Adolf Hitler's Germany was rearming and preparing for expansion. The warning signs were present, but many people felt that the atrocities of World War I would not happen again. However, in September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, breaking the peace. The invasion started World War II, with Britain and France declaring war on Germany. As Germany launched its Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, across Europe, the scales of power shifted. Despite their best efforts, Britain and France were unable to halt the German army's rapid and deadly advances. Poland fell fast, and by the spring of 1940, France was also overwhelmed. The powerful France, once a pillar of European power, was forced to surrender. With France vanquished and much of Europe under Nazi control, Britain was left alone to face Hitler's war machine. The country that once represented global strength was now Western Europe's last chance for freedom. But Hitler wasn't confident in provoking the daring battle yet. This was why he hoped for a negotiated peace with the British government and did not prepare for an amphibious assault on Britain until much later after the fall of France. As the war progressed and the situation changed, the collapse of Poland marked a historic turning point for Germany. Interestingly, Hitler didn't always openly plan to go against Poland. Adolf Hitler became Germany's leader in 1933, and one of his first major foreign policy acts was to establish a non-aggression pact with Poland in January 1934. This meant that Germany and Poland decided not to attack each other. Many Germans were outraged because the Treaty of Versailles had resulted in Poland gaining some of Germany's territory following World War I. However, Hitler needed this arrangement to ensure that France and Poland did not join forces against Germany before he could rebuild Germany's military power. During the early 1930s, France, and particularly Great Britain, attempted to prevent conflict with Germany by implementing a policy known as appeasement. This policy, heavily supported by British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, sought to maintain European peace by accommodating some of Germany's demands. Many individuals in Britain believed it was reasonable to change some aspects of the Treaty of Versailles, which had been severe on Germany following World War I. Furthermore, at that point, neither Britain nor France was prepared to fight another war with Germany. Britain and France generally let Nazi Germany disregard the rules established by the Treaty of Versailles. Germany expanded its military, 1935, moved troops to the Rhineland in 1936, and annexed Austria in March 1938. when Hitler threatened to attack Czechoslovakia, British and French leaders signed the Munich Agreement in September 1938. This agreement allowed Germany to take over the Sudetenland, a portion of Czechoslovakia, in exchange for Hitler's promise to settle future disputes peacefully. Despite this pledge, Germany annexed the remainder of Czechoslovakia in March 1939. In response, Britain and France agreed to protect Poland. However, this did not dissuade Hitler, who was eager to go to war. On April 28, 1939, Hitler declared that Germany was no longer bound by the non-aggression pact with Poland. A few months later, in August 1939, Hitler signed a new non-aggression agreement with the Soviet Union. The pact was secretly intended to split Poland between Germany and the Soviet Union, allowing Hitler to attack Poland without fear of Soviet intervention. In September 1939, Germany successfully invaded Poland, prompting France and Britain, which had alliances with Poland, to declare war on Germany, officially starting World War II. On October 9th, Hitler devised a strategy to destroy these allies and seize as much territory as possible in Holland, Belgium, and northern France. This land would be utilized to launch aerial and naval attacks against Britain. As the potential of Germany dominating ports in the Channel rose, Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, commander of the German army, considered what may happen next. He asked his officer, Captain Hans-Jürgen Reinecke, to study how Germany could land troops in England if necessary. Reinecke worked on this for 5 days and came up with a list of tasks that needed to be completed. 1. Prevent the British Navy from reaching the landing locations. 2. Defeat the Royal Air Force. 3. Destroy all British naval units around the shore. 4. Prevent British submarines from assaulting landing ships. On November 22, 1939, Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, intelligence head Joseph Schmid posed that Germany undermined the British economy by preventing imports and targeting seaports. Hitler agreed that once Germany controlled the coast, the Luftwaffe and Navy would blockade British ports with mines, attack ships and warships, and target shore infrastructure and industry. This plan oversaw the early stages of the Battle of Britain. In December 1939, the German army devised Nordwest, a strategy that incorporated ideas from the Navy and Air Force. It proposed invading England's eastern coast with 100,000 soldiers landing by ship. The Navy was tasked with keeping British ships out of the Channel, while the Air Force was in charge of controlling the sky. The Navy estimated it would take a year to organize the ships, and that invading England would be extremely difficult. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, chief of the Luftwaffe, agreed that a coordinated operation to land in England should only take place if Britain had already been beaten. When Adolf Hitler became Germany's leader, he believed that France and Britain would stay out of the conflict. However, he planned for the potential that they may become involved. His objective was to launch a fast attack on the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg to prevent Allied forces from easily reaching Germany, particularly its industrial region, the Ruhr. If the German onslaught reached the Atlantic coast, it would serve as a staging ground for air and marine operations against Britain. There were debates among senior German officers over this idea, but supporters persuaded Hitler to adopt it. Britain and France entered World War II after Germany attacked Poland in September 1939. Expecting Germany to march west, Britain dispatched a strong contingent of soldiers, known as the British Expeditionary Force, BEF, to join their allies in France and Belgium. By the winter of 1939-1940, the BEF had risen to 390,000 troops. In September 1939, French forces made a short advance into Germany's Saar region before withdrawing. After that, both sides simply waited, constructing trenches along their borders but not fighting. The peaceful time of waiting became known as the Phony War. The German invasion of Northwest Europe employed a dangerous but well-planned method known as blitzkrieg, which translates to lightning war. This meant hitting the opponent with overwhelming force in a strategic location. Tanks, artillery, infantry, and aircraft moved fast to surround and trap the enemy, forcing them to surrender. The primary objective of blitzkrieg was to confuse and disorient the other side, preventing them from reforming or counterattacking. However, this strategy was dangerous since if the Allies were able to cut off the German supplies, the attack could fail. However, the Allies were so confused and outmaneuvered that they were unable to mount a significant resistance, allowing the Germans to prevail. The Germans' better communication, which included radios and even the smallest troops, enabled them to move and respond more quickly than the Allies. The close coordination between German air and ground forces contributed to their catastrophic power. The purpose of Case Yellow was to bait the major Allied forces into northern France and Belgium, then trap them with a pincer move. On May 10th, German forces moved through the Netherlands and Belgium as part of the northern pincer. Though powerful, this onslaught was merely a distraction to pull the finest Allied forces northward. The real offensive came from the pincer's southern end, which struck through Luxembourg and into Belgium. The Germans moved through the thickly forested Ardennes region, which was deemed to be too difficult for big forces to cross swiftly. They then fought their way across the Meuse River at Sedan on May 13th. The Germans broke through French defenses and surged across northern France, causing uncertainty and panic. With no major Allied reserves or counterattacks, the Germans crossed the English Channel near Abbeville only a week later. The pincer movement entrapped Dutch, French, Belgium, and British soldiers, confining them to a small area near the coast of northern France and Belgium. With no effective response, the only way for the Allied forces to escape was by water, via ports such as Boulogne, Calais, Dunkirk, and Ostend. Millions of civilians were trapped amid the battle. An Allied counterattack at Arras was momentarily successful, but ultimately failed due to a lack of support. Except for Dunkirk, all French and Belgian ports north of the Somme had been seized by May 26th. Belgium surrendered on May 28th, with Case Yellow concluded by June 4th. Fighting finally started in the spring of 1940, but not in France or Belgium. On April 9th, German troops invaded Denmark and Norway. Germany intended to secure its iron ore supplies from Sweden, which were transported via Norwegian ports. They also hoped to prevent the British Navy from dominating the North Atlantic by impeding German shipping. Denmark immediately surrendered on the very day it was invaded. British and French troops attempted to help Norway, but they came too late. By June 10, 1940, Norway was completely under German control. However, near the northern town of Narvik, British vessels inflicted significant damage on the German Navy, known as the Kriegsmarine. This made it difficult for Germany to threaten British authority over the North Sea and English Channel. In the short term, it also limited the German Navy's ability to assist in subsequent battles, particularly the historic evacuations from Dunkirk. By the last week of May 1940, the majority of the British Expeditionary Force, BEF, as well as a significant number of French and Belgian soldiers, had been trapped by the German army near Dunkirk. A maritime evacuation was critical, but chances of success were slim. On the evening of May 26th, the Royal Navy launched Operation Dynamo to rescue these soldiers. Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay led the operation from his headquarters in Dover Castle. For the next 9 days, the Royal Navy, along with commercial ships and small civilian boats, went back and forth between Dunkirk and Britain, rescuing men under relentless German air, sea, and land attacks. Over 900 vessels took part in the evacuation. Some transported soldiers from the beaches to larger ships, while others embarked immediately from Dunkirk harbor. Despite the loss of many ships and lives, 338,226 British and Allied troops had arrived safely in England by June 4th. This rescue has been dubbed a miracle and remains the largest amphibious evacuation ever performed during conflict. It allowed the British Army to regroup and keep fighting. Following the evacuation from Dunkirk, the British government began preparing for an unexpected German invasion. The country issued rationing orders to the civilian population and planned to remove children to the deep countryside. British intelligence was feeding the Germans inaccurate data as part of a military defense strategy. Furthermore, the British Engineer Corps constructed anti-invasion barriers around beaches and potential landing places. These moves looked excellent on paper, but Britain was on the verge of collapse. The truth was that there were insufficient resources to defend the entire island. The absence of trained labor was also an issue. Surprisingly, civilian volunteers with homemade weapons and no formal training established the Home Guard. People also donated their metal pans and utensils. The molten metal contributed to the production of fighter planes. Britain's only defenses were the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force. In these terrible times, Winston Churchill's leadership and forceful language boosted morale and terrified the Germans. Meanwhile, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Belgium had already fallen, and France was next. The German army moved fast to launch Case Red, attacking south into the heart of France with the intention of seizing Paris. This started on June 5th with strikes along the Somme and Aisne rivers. At the same time, another German army attacked the Maginot Line, a network of fortifications on France's eastern border from the French side. The second onslaught stopped French troops on the Maginot Line from assisting those defending against the German assault on Paris. Despite the intense fighting, the loss of numerous Allied troops and equipment in Case Yellow allowed the Germans to gradually acquire an advantage. The Germans captured Paris on June 14th, and France surrendered on June 22nd. Many Allied soldiers were in risk of being captured as a result of the Germans' quick advance. Between June 10th and June 25th, Operation Cycle and Operation Ariel rescued an additional 192,000 troops and civilians. However, many lives were lost, notably those aboard the HMT Lancastria, which was sunk by German planes. Between 3,000 and 6,000 persons perished, making it the deadliest naval disaster in British history. Thousands of soldiers were also left behind and became POWs. The armistice kept the southern portion of France in French authority, but France effectively became a puppet state for Germany. The new French government was established in Vichy, but by late 1942, German and Italian forces had taken control after the Allies attacked North Africa. France wouldn't be liberated until the Allied assault of Normandy in June 1944, nearly 2 years later. Therefore, by June of 1940, Britain became extremely isolated. Following the defeat of France, the Nazi threat loomed huge over the British Isles. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, known for his unwavering spirit, roused his country with courageous speeches proclaiming that Britain would never surrender. Nonetheless, despite Churchill's determination, the British faced a catastrophic situation. The British Army had been severely weakened by the evacuation from Dunkirk, and its residual forces were ill-equipped to meet the might of the German military. The British coastline defenses were reinforced with concrete bunkers and obstacles, and a volunteer defense force known as the Home Guard was formed. However, with limited weapon and equipment, this force could only accomplish so much. The fundamental issue for Britain was to endure the predicted German invasion while gaining time to rebuild its strength and seek foreign assistance. The situation for Great Britain looked dire by July of 1940. Germany had stormed through the majority of Western Europe in less than 2 months. With the overwhelming German army, panzers and Stuka dive bombers, they soon took over the Netherlands and Belgium. France, despite having 114 divisions and more tanks and artillery than Germany, fought out a little longer before surrendering on June 22nd. Britain barely managed to evacuate its withdrawing troops from Dunkirk, which was regarded a minor miracle. The Germans, with all the victories in Europe, now turned their full attention to Britain. Their initial objective was to seize control of the sky, which they believed was required before launching an invasion. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, boasted that it could defeat the Royal Air Force, RAF, in southern England in 4 days and destroy the rest within 4 weeks. Winston Churchill had recently taken over as Prime Minister from Neville Chamberlain on May 10th. He was determined and defiant. In a well-known speech to Parliament, Churchill vowed, "We shall fight on the beaches, on the landing grounds, in the fields, in the streets, and in the hills. We shall never surrender." Not everyone in Britain supported Churchill's determination. Some in the British administration, including Foreign Secretary Lord Halifax, believed that Britain had already been defeated. To Churchill's disappointment, Richard A. Rab Butler, the Under-Secretary of State for International Affairs, suggested to Swedish diplomats that Britain may consider a peace treaty if suitable terms could be reached. Meanwhile, on July 31st, Joseph P. Kennedy, the U.S. ambassador to Britain, notified the U.S. State Department that the German Luftwaffe was capable of crippling the RAF. Senator Key Pittman, head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, warned publicly that Britain was completely unable to defend itself and that nothing the United States could offer would affect the outcome. Even General Maxime Weygand, the former commander-in-chief of the French military, sadly predicted that in 3 weeks, England will have their neck wrung like a chicken. The entire world was witnessing the dramatic growth of German military force and warfare technology in real time, and it was puzzling. After all, following World War I, the Treaty of Versailles prohibited Germany from rearming, including the development of aviation. However, under the cover of civil aviation, aircraft development continued, and secret experiments were rampant. When Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, he publicly advocated militarization. The Luftwaffe was initially constituted as a separate branch of service in 1935, and it swiftly grew to become Europe's largest air force. Many thought it to be the best. German pilots developed their combat abilities during the Spanish Civil War, which lasted from 1936 to 1939. They served as volunteers in the Condor Legion, assisting Francisco Franco and the Nationalists. This experience allowed them to hone their skills, test their aircraft such as the Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber and the Bf-109 fighter, and obtain critical knowledge. Even America's most well-known aviator, Charles A. Lindbergh, took note after touring German bases and factories in September 1938. He reported back to Kennedy in London, saying that Germany had the potential to destroy London, Paris, and Prague if it chose to. Lindbergh observed that neither England nor France has sufficient modern warplanes to successfully defend or counterattack. Germany's swift successes in Poland, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France added to the Luftwaffe's formidable reputation. By July 1940, the Luftwaffe was roughly twice as large as the RAF. However, raw numbers were not the only determining factor in the Battle of Britain. The fight essentially lined up RAF Fighter Command's first-line aircraft against the fighters, bombers, and dive bombers of 2 German air fleets. In this encounter, the Germans had a substantial advantage. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, commander of Fighter Command, bitterly observed, "Our young men will have to shoot down their young men at a rate of 5 to 1. However, the Luftwaffe was not as invincible as it seemed. One of its key flaws was inconsistency in leadership. The Luftwaffe's commander-in-chief was Reich Marshal Hermann W. Göring, a World War I ace who had taken over leadership of the flying circus from the famed Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron. Interestingly, by 1940, Göring had become a caricature of himself, overweight, ranting, and out of touch with modern air warfare. He was prone to making rash and unstable decisions. When Hitler intervened in Luftwaffe decision-making, as he frequently did, the consequences were considerably worse. The Luftwaffe's immediate challenge was that it was not intended for the type of mission required to capture Britain. Its strength was in blitzkrieg tactics, a fast lightning war in which the German army, aided by Stuka airstrikes, rapidly overran Poland in 1939 and Western Europe in 1940. During the Blitzkrieg and the Spanish Civil War, the Luftwaffe excelled at providing close air support to ground soldiers. The dive bomber was effective at hitting small, compact targets, which were common in Spain. But Britain was different. This lack of crucial judgment meant that the Luftwaffe relied too much on dive bombers, where pilots struggled to hit targets from high altitudes. Ernst Udet, another colorful flying ace from World War I, was an outspoken supporter of the dive bomber. Göring appointed Udet as the Luftwaffe's technical chief, a position for which he was completely unsuitable. Udet insisted on dive bombing capability in all bombers, which added weight and limited speed in several aircraft still in construction. The Ju-87 Stuka was the Luftwaffe's most distinctive dive bomber, recognizable by its inverted gull wings, strong fixed undercarriage, and wheel spats. It was a very effective fear weapon during the Blitzkrieg. The Stuka also had a wind-powered siren that sounded during diving attacks, adding to its psychological impact. However, Germany lacked long-range bombers and did not launch its first strategic bomber, the Heinkel 177, until 1944. In 1940, the Luftwaffe used a variety of twin-engine medium bombers, notably the slow-moving HE-111 and DO-17. These bombers had been adequate to support the Stuka on the continent, but they were outmatched during the Battle of Britain. The Ju-88 was the best of Germany's medium bombers, with longer range and faster speed, but it was still in its early phases of development at the time. The Luftwaffe also used the Bf-110, a twin-engine fighter with good speed and range, but insufficient agility to combat RAF fighters effectively. While it may have served as a fighter bomber later in the war, it was rarely utilized in that capacity during 1940. Willy Messerschmitt designed the Bf-109 fighter, which was Germany's best aircraft and possibly the best aircraft of the war. When it debuted in 1935, the Bf-109 was the world's most advanced fighter, combining a strong engine with a tiny, elegant airframe. It went on to claim more victories than any other aircraft during World War II. However, in 1940, its short range posed a severe disadvantage. The Bf-109, which flew from French bases, had only around 10 minutes of fighting time over London, preventing it from escorting bombers on deep penetration operations into Britain. For the first time, the Luftwaffe encountered a first-class opponent in the RAF. The RAF was founded in 1918 as a separate military force and was reformed in 1936 into numerous commands, including Bomber Command, Fighter Command, Coastal Command, and Training Command. The RAF had two outstanding planes that would prove critical in the Battle of Britain. The Hawker Hurricane, the workhorse of Fighter Command, was paired with the Supermarine Spitfire, a thoroughbred fighter. In July 1940, the Royal Air Force had 29 Hurricane units and 19 Spitfire squadrons ready for action. The Spitfire, which debuted in 1936, was one of the best fighters of all time. It stayed in service long enough to shoot down a German jet aircraft, the Me-262, in 1944. It became an emblem of the Battle of Britain. The Hurricane was bigger and slower than the Spitfire, but it could also outturn the Bf-109, giving it an advantage in dogfights. Bf-109 pilots favored attacking from higher altitudes, where they had an advantage. The RAF also had various force multipliers, with radar being the most important. The British called radar RDF, radio direction finding, until 1943 when they adopted the American name radar. The British were not the only ones who used radar. The German Navy also used it in limited quantities. However, Udet rejected radar for the Luftwaffe in 1938, feeling it did not fit his concept of air combat. Dowding, the commander of Fighter Command, was an early adopter of radar. When the Battle of Britain began, Britain had a network of 29 RDF stations throughout its southern and eastern coastlines. These radar units could spot Luftwaffe formations more than 100 miles out at sea. When German jets entered British airspace, the Royal Observer Corps tracked them. This allowed the RAF to plan when and where to deploy their planes and to scramble them at the last possible moment. Unbeknownst to Germany, Britain had cracked the high-level German Enigma code. The intelligence derived from these intercepts was dubbed Ultra. It provided useful information regarding the German Air Force's movements, but did not significantly improve daily intelligence from other sources. Another benefit for the RAF was high-octane fuel. At the start of the war, both the Luftwaffe and the RAF used 87-octane aviation fuel. Beginning in May 1940, the RAF began using 100-octane fuel from the United States, increasing the performance of their Merlin engines in Hurricanes and Spitfires from 1,000 to approximately 1,300 horsepower. Dowding, nicknamed Stuffy, had been head of Fighter Command since its inception in 1936. He was the RAF's oldest senior commander, private, eccentric, and unyielding, but a highly skilled leader. Under his direction, the first British radar experiments with aircraft were carried out. Dowding's tenacity made him unpopular among Air Ministry politicians. Fighter Command, headquartered at Bentley Priory in the London suburbs, was divided into 4 units. The largest was 11 Group, which included southeastern England and the approaches to London. Its commander was Air Vice Marshal Keith R. Park, an exceptional officer who, like Dowding, was unpopular among politicians. To the north was 12 Group, which covered the Midlands and East Anglia and was led by Air Vice Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory. The other 2 groups played smaller roles. 10 Group covered southwest England, while 13 Group covered northern England and Scotland. Germany had 2 major air fleets. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring commanded Luftflotte II, which was located in Brussels. Its Bf-109 fighters were based at Pas du Calais, across from Dover. Luftflotte II also operated bombers and fighters in northern France and Belgium. Luftflotte III, headed by Field Marshal Hugo Sperle of Paris, operated from sites in Normandy and Brittany. Goering and his staff misjudged the RAF. In early August 1940, Goering estimated the British had only 400 to 500 fighters. On August 9th, Fighter Command had 715 ready to fly and an additional 424 in storage. After France fell, Hitler anticipated Britain to accept his demands of peace. The Luftwaffe conducted infrequent bombing raids on southern England and Channel ships. The official Battle of Britain began on July 10th with a fighter combat over the Channel. The Luftwaffe lost 13 aircraft, while the RAF lost 10. On July 16th, Hitler authorized the preparations for Operation-Sealion. The German Navy stated that September 15th was the earliest it could be ready. Initially, the Luftwaffe aimed at the entire RAF and scattered its resources before focusing on fighter command. Realizing the importance of the radar sites, the Luftwaffe aimed to eliminate them, believing it will be a bigger blow. However, they targeted radar towers, which were simple to replace, rather than the radar site buildings where operators worked. In another error, Goering instructed the Luftwaffe to bomb other targets rather than radar stations. In July, the RAF lost 58 planes, but the worst was yet to come. Goering declared August 13th as Adler Tag, or Eagle Day, and started 1,485 strikes against Britain, believing that the British Air Force would soon be eliminated. Kennedy, persuaded by the German claims, advised President Roosevelt that England would fight but might not win. On August 15th, Goering instructed his air fleets to give their all. They flew almost 2,000 sorties in one day, the most during the Battle of Britain. The Germans claimed 99 RAF fighters were destroyed, although the RAF lost 34 fighters and shot down 75 German planes. Fighting on August 19th was also intense. From July to October, the RAF Bomber Command flew 9,180 missions against targets in Europe. This kept several German fighters focused on air-based defense, restricting their ability to attack Britain. From August 19th to the 23rd, the battle was halted due to adverse conditions, providing much-needed recovery for both sides. When fighting resumed on August 24th, the Luftwaffe targeted 11 group airfields. The Germans came up with a different strategy and intended to attract RAF planes into air engagements. However, Park and Dowding opted to target German bombers instead. The Stuka, which had been effective during the Blitzkrieg, was far less effective against Spitfires and Hurricanes. Its modest speed left it vulnerable during bombing runs. Goering withdrew the Stuka from action on August 19th, citing high losses. The attacks persisted with great vigor. On August 30th and 31st, more than 1,600 German planes arrived. Fighter Command suffered its worst day on August 31st, losing 39 planes and 14 pilots. Despite massive casualties, the RAF's aircraft production could not keep up, and experienced pilots became scarce. Pilots often flew many missions every day. Civilian teams from Hawker and Supermarine assisted RAF ground crews in repairing damaged aircraft quickly. The British called this period the Desperate Days. Churchill later stated that between August 24th and September 6th, Fighter Command was under intense pressure. Just as things looked gloomy, Hitler made a critical mistake. After 2 German pilots mistakenly struck London, the RAF responded by bombing Berlin suburbs. Germans were upset, despite having been guaranteed that their capital was safe. On September 5th, Hitler altered the Luftwaffe's strategy, shifting the emphasis from airfields to London. This transfer relieved some of the load on Fighter Command. RAF losses dropped when replacements caught up. By focusing on London, the Germans had lost sight of their primary goal: to eliminate the RAF in preparation for Operation-Sealion. On September 15th, Germany launched a huge attack, including around 400 bombers and 700 fighters. Park committed all available reserves, and the RAF used every plane it could. The RAF scored a big success by shooting down 56 German aircraft. Many others suffered severe damage or plunged into the Channel. The RAF lost 28 aircraft. This was the final occasion the Luftwaffe assaulted Fighter Command with such ferocity. Both sides acknowledged that the Luftwaffe's attempt to destroy the RAF had failed. On September 17th, Hitler postponed Operation-Sealion indefinitely, providing respite to the German Navy, which was preparing for invasion. By October 31st, the British Defense Committee had concluded that the possibility of invasion was relatively remote. It represented the end of the Battle of Britain. Not everyone was aware of the Luftwaffe's defeat. On November 10th, the Boston Sunday Globe cited Kennedy as declaring, "Democracy is finished in England." Kennedy denied it, but a witness corroborated the reporter's claims. Kennedy resigned as ambassador and from the Roosevelt administration that month. Both sides suffered significant casualties, while reports of enemy aircraft being shot down were frequently overstated. The RAF lost 1,547 aircraft, 1,023 from Fighter Command, 376 from Bomber Command, and 148 from Coastal Command. The Germans lost 1,887 aircraft, including 223 Bf-110s and 650 Bf-109s. Hurricanes brought down the vast majority of German aircraft. The RAF employed Spitfires against Bf-109s and Hurricanes against bombers, although Hurricanes also shot down a large number of fighters. Fighter Command had slightly more planes toward the end of the Battle of Britain than when it began, thanks to British industry production. The RAF had more pilots than in July, but it had lost several experienced ones. Between August and December 1940, the German aircraft industry was unable to meet production demands, resulting in a 30% decline in Luftwaffe fighter strength and a 25% decrease in bomber strength. Churchill later recalled Wagon's prediction made in June 1940 that England would be defeated in 3 weeks. Churchill replied, "Some chicken, some neck." The Blitz, or relentless bombing of British cities, began as the Battle of Britain came to an end. Hitler's reasons for the Blitz are unclear, but it killed over 40,000 civilians and inflicted enormous destruction with no strategic effect. Meanwhile, Berlin focused on a new goal. Hitler issued an order in December to prepare for Operation Barbarossa, the Russian invasion. Goering was optimistic, claiming that the Luftwaffe would fire down the Red Air Force like clay pigeons. Operation-Sealion, Germany's big plan to attack Britain, encountered numerous insurmountable challenges, ultimately failing. Here are the main reasons for the failed invasion. For starters, the Luftwaffe's inability to achieve air superiority posed a significant challenge. Despite Hermann Goering's overconfident claims, the German Air Force could never command the skies over southern England. The Royal Air Force's persistent defense during the Battle of Britain ensured that Germany's attempts to destroy British radar sites, airfields, and aircraft were only partially successful. The Luftwaffe's failure to gain the air superiority required for a safe invasion proved fatal to the mission. Second, the Royal Navy's superiority in the English Channel posed a strong barrier to the invasion. Germany's strategy relied on seizing control of the Channel to ensure the safe passage of their invasion fleet. However, the British Navy, with its formidable vessels and effective naval strategies, retained control over the sea. As the German forces encountered substantial obstacles from the British fleet, the hope of achieving even temporary naval superiority faded. Another important aspect was Germany's lack of adequate amphibious landing craft. The mission necessitated the use of numerous specialized landing craft to ferry troops and equipment across the Channel. Germany's logistics preparations fell short on this front. The small quantity of landing craft, along with their vulnerability to British naval and air strikes, rendered a large-scale amphibious invasion very risky and unfeasible. Furthermore, as September continued, the weather in the Channel deteriorated, complicating invasion operations. Unpredictable and extreme weather, including storms and choppy seas, severely delayed naval and air operations. These harsh conditions made it considerably more difficult for Germany to launch a successful amphibious assault and establish the requisite maritime control. Furthermore, Hitler's shift in priority to the Soviet Union had a significant impact on the sustainability of Operation-Sealion. It is unclear whether the invasion plan was ever intended to be fully implemented, or if it was a geopolitical play to force Britain to surrender. As it became evident that Britain was unwilling to negotiate, Hitler chose to focus his efforts in the east, diverting German resources and attention away from the failed invasion plans. Logistics and resource restrictions were other important considerations. An invasion of Britain needed substantial logistical support, including supplies, equipment, and coordination among several military branches. Germany faced several challenges in effectively handling these logistics, especially given the ongoing conflict on numerous fronts and the pressure on its resources. The psychological and strategic consequences of the Battle of Britain cannot be underestimated. The British people's determination and resilience, along with the effective defense maintained by the Royal Air Force, had a significant impact on German morale and strategic calculations. The knowledge that the invasion would fail, along with the failure to overcome British determination, led to the decision to postpone Operation-Sealion indefinitely. An often overlooked part of Britain's defense was the work done at Bletchley Park, where British codebreakers deciphered German communications. The Germans employed the Enigma machine to encrypt messages, believing it was unbreakable. However, Polish mathematicians made early headway in deciphering the Enigma code, and the British continued their work. British cryptographers, led by Alan Turing, built computers known as BOMB to break the Enigma codes. This data, known as Ultra, supplied important information about German plans and movements. For example, it enabled the British to anticipate and resist German strikes, notably those launched during the Battle of Britain. The success of Bletchley Park's codebreakers contributed significantly to Britain's ability to withstand the German invasion. The intelligence acquired enabled the RAF to make strategic decisions and effectively counter the Luftwaffe's onslaught. Even though Operation-Sealion was postponed, the fighting continued with the Blitz, a long-term bombing campaign against British cities. The Blitz inflicted extensive damage and loss of life, yet it failed to undermine British morale. Churchill's commitment, allied with the British people's fortitude, guaranteed that Britain stood firm in its fight against the Axis powers. The failure of Operation-Sealion also laid the groundwork for increased American engagement. Recognizing the strategic imperative of aiding Britain, President Franklin D. Roosevelt approved the Lend-Lease Act, which supplied military aid. This help was critical in strengthening Britain's defense and preparing for future conflicts. Since World War II ended, people have speculated about what could have happened if Germany had attacked Britain. Films and television shows had covered a wide range of topics. For example, the 1942 film Went the Day Well depicts a heroic British resistance, whereas the 2017 BBC drama SSGB paints a darker picture of collaboration. Assuming Germans managed to overcome all the failures, and Hitler had been able to achieve his goals through Operation-Sealion, they would have had to occupy London and establish a military government. The Nazis intended to demolish British cultural landmarks and museums and possibly reinstall Edward VIII as a puppet ruler, though this was never entirely established. German occupation would have also required considerable propaganda campaigns. The Gestapo intended to collect British documents, target political opponents, and dominate the media, especially the BBC, in order to enforce their narrative. In addition to the immediate occupation, Germany's long-term objective was to push into the Soviet Union. Occupying Britain would have provided Germany with important resources and industrial capabilities to further its aspirations. If Germany had successfully invaded Britain, it would have made considerable use of British equipment and industries, as well as attempted to recruit or use British knowledge in armaments and technology. This exploitation may have greatly prolonged the conflict by increasing Germany's industrial and military capabilities. Increased production and sophisticated technologies may have strengthened German forces, potentially shifting the balance of power. As a result, this would have prolonged worldwide misery, with more widespread conflict and devastation hitting not only Britain, but also other Allied states, delaying the eventual Allied victory and peace. Without a doubt, Operation-Sealion is still one of the most famous unsuccessful military missions in history. Strategic miscalculations, the tenacity of the British people, and the essential role of intelligence and technology all contributed to the disaster. The Battle of Britain highlighted the significance of air supremacy, the efficiency of radar, and the relevance of intelligence in modern combat. Germany's inability to attack Britain had far-reaching implications, influencing the outcome of World War II. It constituted a watershed moment in the fight and laid the groundwork for the eventual Allied victory. The account of Operation-Sealion demonstrates the dedication and creativity of those who defended Britain, as well as the complexity of military strategy. It also reflects how misplaced German generals brought defeat despite the raw numbers of soldiers ready to fight to bring glory to the nation. And our next video, Best German Generals of World War II, will show you exactly why.